Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Dellera, and this episode is once again brought to you by our good friends at Rhythm. Rhythm is on the cutting edge of betting technology, incorporating all the best modeling, all the best data analysis, and putting it at your fingertips. Not only do you have the hit rate charts that you normally see for over-under, spreads, player props, whatever, you also can create your own models. You can take the things that you think are important and put them into a model, and then they do all the back end work for you. You don't have to know how to use all the fancy AI and the modeling systems and all the underlying technology. You just have to know ball and say, these are the things that I think are important. And then it'll track your model and let you know if it's profitable long term for you, as long as you have that model. And you can get it for a week free. Check the link in the bio, use our link, and we're giving you a week free to get Rhythm and to try it out for yourselves. And I'm sure it's going to be a tool that you want to add to your betting arsenal. So, with that, this episode now we're looking at the Massive Wednesday slate once again. We just had a bunch of really exciting games for the NBA Cup. I'm recording right now. It's towards the end of Blazers Wolves, and also it's the fourth quarter of Mavericks Golden State Warriors. So Clay's return to the Bay, really interesting game and a lot of fun, honestly. Right now it's tied in the fourth quarter, so it's definitely something that, I've definitely got on in the background over here a little bit that I'm trying to keep some tabs on. But again, a lot of things happened today, and I want to touch on not so much like what the bigger takeaways from these games are just yet. I did talk about it a little bit on Buckets with Matt Moore and Michael Fiddle, and that episode's also out right now too. So we touched on this for about 10 minutes, so I don't want to be redundant. But the biggest thing to me was that the Boston Celtics lost. The Boston Celtics were the consensus favorite coming in. They were the most likely team to advance. They were the most likely team to advance throughout the knockout stages. And with Boston not being there, some of our other big bets are going to have a lot more life into them. Namely, one of the ones that we gave out or two of the ones that we gave out were Anthony Davis MVP 40-1 and Karl Anthony Towns MVP at 100-1. And I gave those out in the huddle. I specifically I waited until tip when the lines were going to move. But I specifically waited to log them because I wanted it to be something that was a huddle exclusive. And you can also hop in the huddle for, let's call it, let's give you, we'll do 50% off the first month. I want to put that link in the bio of this episode. You can 50% off your first month and get all of those promos, and get all the picks, all the things for myself, Matty Chucks, Lord Penguin, and That Guy Bets. But one of the other things that we're going to be doing, and this is special for this episode too, and it's going to be important, is King of the Court is back for DraftKings Sportsbook. And it was one of our favorite promos. That the size of the free bets were absolutely crazy, right? Sounds like they're bringing it back for a lot of either this Wednesday or some Wednesdays moving forward. But it's definitely going to be something that is going to be available to us, right? Well, I'm giving you my top 10 to 15 PRA projections in the huddle every time that every time that there's a King of the Court promo. And that's part of the subscription that you pay for, as part of the things that we're offering. So check it out. Again, 50% off your first month. Highly recommend. And at the end of the day, you're going to be making tons of money. You know that the closing line value is going to be there, the way that we move props, and you're going to get the opportunity to get in for these as early as possible. So I want to talk about this Wednesday NBA slate. And the first game that I want to talk about is first thing actually is that Pacers versus the Magic. The Pacers are like 2-point favorites right now at the time of this recording, but the more important thing is that I'm going to actually be on NBA BetStream again. So you can watch that through your NBA League Pass account. You go to the streams little section on the bottom, kind of, and you can go to the BetStream stream. And it's going to be myself, Matt Moore, and some people from DraftKings. And it's going to be pretty fun. We give the commentary, we give out bets. We're going to talk through some parlays. We're going to talk through some bigger picture gambling things. And it's a little bit like watching it's almost like you're watching the game, but instead of having to listen to the announcers, you're listening to us, and we're giving out some different things that we're noticing, some different angles, maybe a live bet here and there. It's a lot of fun, and it's a cool way for me to help engage with you guys and to have a little bit of a longer form conversation outside of the podcast with some other people. So really excited for that. But the Magic are on a back to back. The Pacers obviously have the rest advantage. The biggest thing to me in this game is you got to worry about Jalen Suggs' ankle. Jalen Suggs left the game a little bit today, did play most of the game, but he tweaked his ankle, still finished with like 17, 4, and 4. But you have to wonder, like, is he going to be on the injury report? Is that going to blow up? How is that going to impact him? How is that going to affect him? So definitely something to keep an eye on. The one player prop that I do like a lot, and I'm all over it, is Benedict Mathurin over 18 and a half points. The big reason why I like this is that they have nobody. Everybody's hurt right now. Aaron Nesmith is out. Andrew Nembhard is out. Isaiah Jackson's out. James Wiseman's out. Obi Toppin, his ankle is the issue, but he's listed as questionable for this game against Orlando. When the biggest thing is that Nembhard isn't playing, and we see a pretty significant spike in Mathurin's minutes anyway over the past couple of games. We've seen him play. He played 41 minutes against the Knicks, scored 38 points. The game prior, 36. The game prior to that, 33. So he's been playing at least 30, 31, 32 minutes for his past 6 games. And that was after starting the season. He started off really strong against Detroit and the Knicks. Then all of a sudden basically fell out of the rotation for 2 games. Was quite the decision by Coach Carlisle, but I think given some of the injuries, we're seeing him brought into the fold a little bit more, and he's really kind of showing out and showing a lot of his value. So when Mathurin has played, just based on the injuries, like I would expect him to play at least really 30 minutes, given what he's played over the past couple of games anyway. When he's played 30 minutes or more, he's hit this in 5 of 6 games this season, averaging 24.2 points per game. If we extrapolate this back over last season, when he's played 30 plus minutes, he's averaged 22.4 points per game over his last 30 games of 30 plus minutes, over in 20 of those 30 games. So 67%. I think this number is just a touch low. I'd wait to see what some alts kind of come out at. I'm okay at 19 and a half. 24 and a half might be interesting, but I think that maybe the better bet in this particular matchup might be for like top point scorer, which I don't see line. I don't see any lineup for that yet, but I think it's going to be decent value because nobody is like a super high scorer. Franz Wagner is probably the closest thing to that. And he's coming off a pretty big game today. He had 32 points. Outside of that, everybody, there's only the only other player that's in the 20s in terms of a player prop point total is Pascal Siakam at 21 and a half. Other than that, like you're looking at Mathurin 18 and a half, Suggs 16 and a half, Halliburton, Miles Turner both at 18 and a half. I think that there is some opportunity here to maybe get like a little bit of a long shot and kind of bet on that ceiling with Mathurin in this game. So I like the 18 and a half points for Benedict Mathurin against the Orlando Magic. And we'll talk about this game in greater detail, obviously, on the bet gap. The next game is the Cavaliers are 9.5 point favorites over the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't think there's any chance in the world that Embiid plays. However, Coach Nick Nurse said that they are going to evaluate the situation between Embiid and Paul George for tomorrow, and they will see what they do. Like maybe they'll play, maybe they won't play, who knows. Then Joel Embiid comes out and makes a comment and he says he wants to play. And when he made the comment earlier in the season about not wanting to play in back-to-backs and probably would never play in a back-to-back, that he's just a troll. Embiid really didn't look good in this game against the Knicks. He was dramatically less aggressive. There seemed to be like in the post on both offense and defense. He did a good job facilitating. And that's something that he's really improved in his game on. So maybe the assists are an angle that you could look at if he is going to play. But he just didn't really look healthy. And I think in a way, it almost like you have to question when they said, all right, well, he's suspended for 3 games. And then Philly just said, all right, well, like he's good to play right now. I don't know. Like, I feel like he wasn't. Like, I wonder, like, truly, if he wasn't suspended, because of the altercation with the member of the media, like would they have just held him out those 3 games? Probably not. Maybe not play against the Knicks. Like who knows how many more games he would have sat, but he just didn't really look right. So I do have a ton of reservations about the fact that he would play. I'm looking at from a prop perspective though in this game. Jared Allen is also on the report for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I wonder if maybe like he won't play if Embiid is out, or if Paul George is out, or maybe if they're both out, because then Cleveland's just going to be like, look, like they really got nobody here. Like we can rest him and give him a little bit of a break here. Either way, I like Evan Mobley in this game. I think that this is a great Evan Mobley game. I think this is a great spot for him. And when we look at what the props are right now, they've got Evan Mobley listed at 17.5 points, 10.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. To me, this line is a little funky because he's not really hit this line this year. And I think what it is, I think that they're actually like giving this line with the thought that not only is Embiid probably not going to play, but also with the thought that they're like hedging Jarrett Allen playing or not. It's not like an insane line for him if Allen does play, but it's definitely like a little bit of a higher line if Allen were to play. And I would see these lines coming down. Jarrett Allen, on the other hand, is at 12.5 points, 10.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists. He's played really well in this particular spot from a scoring perspective, actually, against Philadelphia. And when he's played in these matchups against Embiid over the last couple of years, 17.8 points per game over in 3 of 4 games against Embiid. Whereas Mobley has struggled a little bit more in that particular matchup, only averaging 14 points per game when Embiid is in the lineup against him. So it's definitely something that I'm monitoring, but I could definitely see myself coming around on like an RA or like a rebounds prop for Mobley. I think that's a good angle for him against his Philadelphia team. So that's one of the things that I'm looking out for. I just would truly be surprised if Joel Embiid and Paul George play in this game. So we already know that there's going to be no Maxey. This is a really tough spot, I think, for Philadelphia in regards to their injury report. Looking at the Chicago Bulls versus the New York Knicks, the Bulls are 9-point underdogs against the Knicks. And one of the plays we really need to take a look at in this game, and from like an overall perspective, is that I think there's just going to be a lot of points scored in this game. The Bulls' defense has just been pretty below average, and so is the Knicks, honestly. But from a scoring perspective, Josh Hart's been exceptional so far this year, actually. He's had double-digit points in every game. He's averaging 13.8 points per game. And this is a good spot for him. I think he's going to be able to get downhill pretty well. He's going to get a bunch of rebounds and be able to find a little bit of success here against Chicago. Another spot that I think that we need to consider is, and the problem is that I think this has become a tougher matchup for him, is Zach LaVine over 19.5 points. The guy's averaging 22.5 points per game this season. He's over in 6 of 8 games. And he's gone over against some tougher defensive assignments, including like the Oklahoma City Thunder. He went over against the Memphis Grizzlies. But he did go under against the Orlando Magic, the Atlanta Hawks, 2 teams that have some really strong wing defenders like the Knicks do. So that's a little bit of a concern there. One of the interesting quirks in this game is that Josh Giddey has actually had, in his last 5 games against the New York Knicks, he's had 3 triple doubles. Something to just maybe like mull on. It's like 16-1. I don't think that those are really great odds for him to get a triple double. Just something to monitor. He, in those games, he's at, his RA line is at 12.5. He's gone over it in 4 of 5 games against the Knicks, averaging 18.8 rebounds and assists. Obviously, different team, different scenario, whatever. This has worked for him. The way that New York has defended him recently over the past couple of seasons, he's had tremendous success from a rebounding and assist perspective, and even from a scoring perspective as well. He's averaging 18.6 points per game. So I don't think you could really go wrong with a PRA or an RA. The points is at 12 and a half. The RA is at 12 and a half. I think if I had to pick one, I would go with the RA here, just based on the fact that I'm not sure how New York would necessarily defend him, but I can see him creating a lot of problems for Jalen Brunson in some pick and rolls and some of those offensive actions. So that's one of the things that I would look for Josh Giddey over 12 and a half RA. Maybe take a look and see what you can build out a triple double for. But at 16-1, I'm not super interested, but it's definitely something that, just given the history, I think that you need to consider just like a little bit. I will say from an assist perspective, though, Karl Anthony Towns has been really strong for New York so far this season. He just had 6 assists against the Philadelphia 76ers, and this has been a good matchup for him against, it's been like a decent matchup for him against Vucevic. So it's definitely, I think it's a spot to kind of keep our eye on. It's not something that I want to pull the trigger on just yet. I'm a little concerned about Jalen Brunson's ankle. I would imagine that he plays. I think that it's definitely a good opportunity for him to play. However, he did tweak the ankle. He did come back into the game. He seemed to finish strong. But like I said, similarly to Jalen Suggs, you never know how these players kind of react to those injuries or how this kind of shakes out. But I lean the Knicks in this spot. The Knicks are a team that has consistently dominated bad teams or teams that are like in the lower echelon of the Eastern Conference in particular. And that's kind of where the Bulls are. So just a couple of things that I'm looking at for that game against Chicago. The Pelicans take on the Thunder. The Pelicans are 14.5-point favorites. There's no Chet. Basically, everybody on the Pelicans is dead. And it's good that they got Trey Murphy back, but it's basically Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram, a little bit of Brandon Boston. I want to talk about Brandon Boston because I don't see any player props up for him just yet. I'm refreshing again to see if anything popped in the meantime, like while I've been talking. Let's see. I don't think so. Oh no, we got some stuff. Okay, so let's talk about this. Brandon Boston's points line is set at 15.5. His rebounds line is at 5.5. His assist line is at 3.5. The 3.5, I think, is going to be a play. The biggest thing is that last game he had 15 potential assists. He had 10 assists on 15 potentials against the Brooklyn Nets. I think that this is a great opportunity here, even against a tough Oklahoma City team, in large part because of the fact that Oklahoma City doesn't really have a center. So I think that there are going to be some opportunities for him to dump off to either like Brandon Ingram or Yves Missi on the interior to score for this New Orleans Pelicans team. The 3.5, I think, is just, I honestly just think it's too low. Boston has played now in consecutive games, in 5 games in a row. He's played at least 30 minutes. He's played basically 36 minutes over the past 4 games as well. When we look at this, and it's tough because obviously like scaling the minutes up like this isn't always like accurate, right? He's only played 10 games over the past couple of seasons when he's played 30 minutes. When he's played this allotment of minutes, he's averaged 4.1 assists, 9.2, that's not right, 17.6 rebounds. So the rebounds I don't love, even though Oklahoma City is not like a great rebounding team. I think that if you wanted the rebounds, I would prefer it in a combo prop type of scenario, maybe like an RA, like a 9.5 RA, which is what his line is set at. I think that I could maybe get there. But even then, I think that the biggest edge is from an assist perspective. The assist line is, like I said, at 3.5. He's coming off a 15 potentials game. I know that we're buying a little bit high. However, when you look at what New Orleans has right now, especially with Jose Alvarado being out now too, so it's like it's one fewer ball handler. I think that that's just kind of the role that they need him to play. So even looking at this, right, like he had 5 assists in the second half, and he had, no, I can't break it down that far, but he had 5 assists in the second half. He had 5 assists in the first half. I would imagine that when we break this down, if I was able to, from based on like when Alvarado got hurt and what the situation was with him. Maybe the first half was a little bit lucky in terms of the conversions. Second half, I think, would have been a little bit stronger in terms of the potentials for Brandon Boston. So over 3.5 assists, I think, is a play that we have to look at. I'm also looking at Jalen Williams over 26.5 rebounds plus assists. This line is just too low to me. There's no Chet Holmgren, which is dramatically important because Jalen Williams is actually playing a little bit of the 5. And basically, there's just no centers for Oklahoma City right now. And on the flip side, the centers for New Orleans, Messi, I think, is good, but Messi's a rookie. And then they have Daniel Tice. So they're not like a particularly strong team at defending the interior either. And they're not like a super big team. Like Messi's still only 6'10", not the 6'10" is short, but he's not like a 7-footer, right? Jalen Williams, last game without Chet, 8 rebounds, 28 points, just smacked this PR line, had 36 PR. The reason I think this is important is that he did see minutes at the 5. I do think that he's going to get some opportunities to get a couple rebounds. And when these teams are playing 5 out, basically both teams, both the more so Oklahoma City and then to a lesser extent, the Pelicans, I think that we're going to be seeing a lot more longer rebound opportunities. You're going to see a little bit more opportunity where Jalen Williams can get the ball and get running in transition, trying to kickstart the Oklahoma City offense. And I think that Trey Murphy, even though he's back, he's still on, I would imagine, like a little bit of a minutes restriction, probably about the 26-minute mark. I think that he would play and cover Shea more so than Jalen Williams. And that might mean that we see Brandon Ingram on Jalen Williams, which is a good opportunity for him from a scoring perspective and from a rebounding perspective. So I like Jalen Williams over 26.5 points plus rebounds. I think it's going to be a really good opportunity for him in what could be a pretty fast-paced and open game in terms of the game, in terms of the spacing on the floor. Okay. The Celtics versus the Nets. Tatum said he's going to play. We'll have to see if that holds true or not. Boston lost outright to the Atlanta Hawks today as 16.5 point favorites. That was a tough one. I mean, I was on the Hawks and I was on the Celtics rather. And I really thought they'd take care of business, but they just looked dramatically lackadaisical against that Atlanta Hawks team. And like I mentioned at the top of the show, the NBA Cup has really opened up because of that loss. So I don't have like a particular lean right at this second. I need to see what the injury report looks like. I would imagine that Horford doesn't play on the back-to-back. Tatum says that he wants to play, but I don't know if he's going to play. If Tatum's out, it obviously impacts. Jaylen Brown is going to see a lot more usage. Derek White is going to see a lot more usage. I think that Cornette probably would see a little bit more run. Cornette, maybe a little bit of Tillman, I guess. But that's kind of the pivot there. From the Nets side, Ben Simmons has actually been really good, really good. I'm almost like choking on my water as I'm saying it, right? But Ben Simmons this season, he's actually had a little bit of negative assist luck. He's averaging right now 12 points, 3.5 rebounds, 3.9 assists. Last game he had 10 assists. Last game he had 12 assists. And this season he's averaging 6.1 points, 5.9 rebounds, 7.1 assists. He's actually had a little bit of like negative luck in terms of the assist rate. The conversions are still like under 50% in terms of his potential. So it's something that probably can regulate a little bit. Boston's a little bit of a tougher matchup for him, I think, given the fact that they can just switch everything. They probably aren't really going to defend him too much from a scoring perspective, and then all the defensive options are so strong. However, I do think that his ability to get downhill and drive into the teeth of the defense is pretty important in the spot. So I'm going to look for his assists on a game where it's a little bit of a letdown spot in terms of the schedule for Boston, just given the fact that it's a back-to-back and that, Tatum and Horford, maybe one or both doesn't play. So those are definitely a couple angles right there from the Nets and the Celtics game. The Clippers are 4.5-point dogs to the Rockets. The Clippers have been really strong this season overall. And I will say that, if I can get this to open, I will say that from a net rating perspective, one of the more surprising things, though, is that both these teams are 6-4. The Clippers have the ninth best defense. The Rockets have the fifth best adjusted defense. But the biggest thing to me is that Houston, despite being just 6-4, you would think with that record they might be a little bit better. They have a +3 adjusted net rating overall. And they've been actually one of the better teams in the NBA. So I'm sorry, they're 7-4. And when we look at this game from a projection standpoint, this is a pretty close game I have the Clippers losing by 3 to the Rockets here. So it's a pretty tight game. I think there's probably a little bit of value on the Clippers at the +4.5 number here, but it's nothing that I think is that I need or that I think is necessarily super actionable. From a player prop perspective, I think one of the spots that we need to look at is Zubac against Şengün in this matchup. Normally, this has been a bad matchup for Zubac against the Houston Rockets. However, this version of him has been dramatically different this season. He's averaging like almost 5 points more per game. He's averaging about 5 rebounds more per game. I really do think that this is an interesting alignment for him. His rebound prop is set at 11.5. That's probably the spot that I would want to go look here in this game. And from a assist perspective or from a scoring perspective, I think that one of the better looks in this game would have to be looking at Norman Powell has been tremendous, right? And I think that Norman Powell has had like a really strong season so far. He's gone over this line, is at 21.5 again. And he's been over this line just consistently. He's basically scored 20 points in 10 straight games, and he's gone over this line in 8 consecutive games. This season, he's averaging 26 points per game. The concern that I have that's at this 21.5 line is that he's doing this on the volume's been obviously incredible. However, I wonder if he's going to be able to sustain it, given some of the defensive options that Houston can throw at him, whether it's Dylan Brooks, whether it is, Jalen Green's not a great defensive player. Maybe, Fred VanVleet gets a couple minutes on him. I'm curious to see if he's going to be able to sustain this because the shooting has been insane. Right now, he's shooting 54.1% from the field, and he's shooting, what is he shooting? He's shooting 50% from 3-point range. That is an insane number for anybody. Like, you hate to say, like, we're going to try to catch the falling knife here, but I do have some reservations about Norman Powell's ability to sustain this on a consistent basis. It is an extraordinarily high line for somebody of his like caliber historically, right? Like, I'm not saying that he's a bad player, but the shooting numbers are off the charts. So that's really what my concern is in this game, is that I don't know if Norman Powell is going to be able to continue that level of success on on just a continuous nightly basis. Looking at the Wizards game, this game's a little gross, honestly. But looking at the Wizards game, right? So it's the Wizards versus the Spurs. This game is going to be, I would imagine, a pretty fast-paced game. When we look at the Washington plays at the 4th fastest pace in the league, so it's a little bit of a pace up spot for San Antonio, who plays at the 22nd. And while the Spurs defense has improved to a degree when you have Wemby on the floor, they're still just 14th. Washington is at 27th. Washington also doesn't have a good offense. They're 29th in adjusted offensive rating. I think this is a game where we could see a decent amount of possessions with these teams kind of in transition. Victor has been interesting this year, I think, is probably the best way to put it. He's averaging 19.7 points per game, 10.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists. The blocks have been a little bit all over the place, 3.9 per game this year, but he's only hit this at his 3.5 blocks line in 4 of 11 games. A lot of this is skewed from a 9 block game against the Clippers earlier in the season. One of the spots, though, that I do think is particularly interesting is his turnovers. So his turnovers are at 3.5. He's gone over this line in 6 of 11 games, averaging 3 points. I think that the better pivot off of that isn't necessarily to go that way. I think that we need to go in the direction of who's on the other side, who's maybe defending him. And I think this is it's a tough task. It's a tough situation for him. But Alex Sarr has sneakily been a really good block guy this year. His blocks line is set at 1.5 at plus 105. He's hit this in 8 of 9 games this season, averaging 2.4 blocks per game. I know that this is a very, very difficult matchup for any rookie or any player, let alone a rookie, right? But I do think that if Sarr is given minutes on Wemby, I do think that he's going to be able to get some of these opportunities here just based on the fact that Wemby has been like, even when you watch him, like even when he's been good, there's flashes of like brilliance, so to speak. But then there's other times where he's essentially just making mistakes. So I think that maybe the way to play this is to split it a little bit between the blocks at the 1.5 and then the steals plus blocks at 2.5. You can get that at plus 115. The reason I'm saying split it is I think that there's some opportunity here for Wemby to just have some turnovers, whether it's like steals or, he just loses control of the ball because of some of the defense that's there. Blocking him is obviously a little bit more difficult, I think. But when you look at kind of the hit rate coupled with the fact that Sarr is so involved defensively, he's seeing a lot of minutes. He's seeing about 20, 25, 27 minutes a game. There's a lot of opportunity here for Sarr to kind of see and make his stamp on this game. I'm curious to see how many minutes Devin Vassell is going to play, but I will say Chris Paul over 8.5 assists is probably another look again. He's averaged 20 and 18 potential assists when he's played alongside in these past couple of games where Devin Vassell has played. I want to make sure that I can get that specifically. No, it's 20 and 18 potential assists on not with 9 and 11 actual assists in these past 2 games. So definitely a spot to look at, I think, again for Chris Paul in what is going to be an ultimate pace up game for the San Antonio Spurs against the Washington Wizards here. Moving on to the next game, we have the Timberwolves versus the Blazers. This is crazy. The Wolves just lost outright to the Blazers, and they're playing a back-to-back after a cup game. 7.5 point spread. I'm very curious to see where some of these lines come out. Ant was at 25.5 points last game. He finished with 26. We got that one, which was nice. I would definitely consider running that back. Ant has been pretty solid on no rest. I think that's also a bounce back spot, saying like, hey, like we can't let this team beat us twice in a row. We got to take this to them, and those are some of the narrative things that have kind of worked out for Anthony Edwards as well. So that's something that I would be looking at. I will say it was notable that Ayton didn't play this game on Tuesday night. Curious to see if he plays on the second end of the back-to-back. Looking at the Pistons and the Bucks are at a rest disadvantage. They did just beat the Toronto Raptors in the NBA Cup group play, but they will continue to be, I would imagine that they will continue to be without both Chris Middleton and Damian Lillard. It's possible Lillard's back, though. Lillard was out due to the league's concussion protocols, so I'm not 100% certain whether or not Lillard's going to be back or not. I think that you have to look again if they give us a 6.5 for Giannis's assists. If Dame is out, you have to look at that. Pistons Also, Pistons also played, right? Sorry. No, the Pistons also played and they beat the Miami Heat in overtime to win their group stage matchup. So this is a rest. Nobody's at a rest advantage here. We have two teams playing on a back to back. It is, I guess, a slight advantage for Milwaukee, given the fact that they're going to be home for both games, as opposed to Detroit has to travel from Detroit to Milwaukee. So that's one of the things that we can consider there. Cade Cunningham has been incredible from a rebounding and assist perspective. When we look at what Cade Cunningham has been able to do, Cade's RA line has been set at like 14 and a half, 15 and a half, and he just keeps smacking it. It keeps going up and he keeps hitting it. He's hit this now, the 14 and a half line. He's hit that in 5 straight games, including 3 triple doubles over that stretch. So definitely something to keep an eye out for against Milwaukee, who may or may not be with Damian Lillard. So just something else to keep an eye out for in that game. And then the Suns take on the Kings. The Kings have a rest advantage. The Suns are on a back-to-back. The Suns did ultimately take care of business against the Utah Jazz, but it was definitely a little bit tighter, I think, than you would have expected. One of the matchups that has not necessarily gone super well for the Kings recently has been Sabonis against Nurkic. So Nurkic did not play in this game against the Utah Jazz. You have to wonder whether or not he's going to be available or not for this contest on the back-to-back. Sabonis, when he's played against Nurkic, has struggled to a degree. What I mean by that is the scoring has been a little bit inconsistent. It's here, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there. And we've seen a couple games under the 20-point threshold. Recently, it's been stronger with 20 points, 25 points, 35 points. From the rebounding perspective, it's been solid 12, 12, 18, 12, 17. The problem with this is that Sabonis's lines are set so high. They're like 13 and a half, 14 and a half. The number is almost like outrageous, right? And it becomes a little bit difficult. And from an assist perspective, he's been pretty good lately. He just only had 5, and we bet on him the other day. We had the line at 6.5. I liked over the 6.5, and he finished with 5. Basically, had 5 in the first quarter. The toughest thing with Sabonis this year has been when he's been playing alongside, obviously, of 2 heavier usage players in DeMar DeRozan and De'Aaron Fox. And then we're even seeing more minutes from like Malik Monk, Keegan Murray, whatever. And the problem is that there's only so much usage that can go around. And as the game gets later, Sabonis seems to fall out of the offensive plan more and more. And getting some of those opportunities, even after strong starts, has been a little bit harder for him so far this season. So Sabonis is a guy that I like to bet. I think he's really good, especially from a player prop perspective, but it's been harder to back because there's a little bit of inconsistency in his role, depending on the way the score is or the game is unfolding. But he's definitely somebody that I'm looking at and maybe considering for a play in this spot. Finally, the last game on the slate is the Grizzlies versus the Lakers. The Grizzlies still going to be without a couple guys. One of the things that I was looking at for this game is I do like LeBron James on his assist prop. So he only had 6 against Memphis the other day. However, he's had 16 and 13 in his last 2 games against Philly and Toronto. And the biggest thing is that even in the game against Memphis, where he only had 6, he had 19 potential assists. And we've seen his potentials spike over the last 5 games. He's had 19, 15, 19, 21, 23. His assist line is set at 8.5, which is an admittedly like relatively, it's a pretty high number here. However, I do think that it's something to monitor. I do think that it's a good spot for us to kind of try to jump in here for. Even though his history against the Memphis Grizzlies has been basically he doesn't get this. He doesn't get this. He's been under 8.5 in 14 of 16 games against them. But I think that right now, the way that they're using Anthony Davis and what his role is in the offense, we're seeing a little bit of a different situation here, and a little bit of a different spot for LeBron. Additionally, D'Angelo Russell is a game time decision. So we're going to have to see whether or not he plays or not. But when D'Angelo Russell has not played, we've seen LeBron last season. What we saw from him was in 6 games, he averaged 9.2 assists per game when D'Angelo Russell didn't play. His floor was at 7. He had 14, 8, 9, 7, 7, and 10. So he split this. He was over in 3, under in 3. However, given what we're seeing right now from LeBron and the way that the offense is kind of being run, and LeBron's seen his usage see it like a little bit of an uptick of late, I think that it's particularly notable that the scoring, it's not that the scoring is there so much. It's been there it was there in the Memphis game. However, the assists have been really shining through, and the potentials have really been shining through over the past couple of games. So I like LeBron over 8.5 assists. I also think this is a really good spot for Anthony Davis to score. And part of this has to do with the fact that when LeBron played Memphis and he had the 6 potentials, AD didn't play. And LeBron had to do a bulk of the scoring. He had to really take over the game from front to back, whether it was scoring, facilitating, what have you. This, I think, is a really good spot for AD. I don't like the matchup for Zach Edey. It's a tough matchup for Jaren Jackson Jr. I think that Jaren Jackson Jr. is one of the better players that can try to defend him. But the 2 most recent games, when they didn't have like Steven Adams as the fallback, AD scored 31 and 36 against Memphis. So his line is set at 27.5. He's on the report because of the eye injury, but he only scored 22 points against Toronto, but that was in large part because of the fact that he didn't play. He only played 25 minutes before getting hurt. He was cruising towards this 27.5 line, or it was 28.5 last game. So I really like a combo of LeBron assists, Anthony Davis points. I think this is a really good spot for the Lakers to really show out against the Memphis team that they're probably going to be competing with to some degree in the standings. And given the fact they don't have John Morant, this is a game that if you're the Lakers, especially after dropping the previous game, you really need to take advantage and try to capitalize on the fact they're going to be missing one of their or the best player on the team. So that's my look at the Wednesday NBA slate. Thursday, we only have one game, and it's Mavericks versus the Jazz. That is going to be like an over city type of game because there's a full slate of games on the Friday for the NBA Cup once again. So just something to kind of keep an eye on, something to monitor, but I'll probably look at in that Mavericks versus Jazz game. The thing that we're going to have to keep an eye on is whether or not Walker Kessler plays. Walker Kessler did not play in this most recent game against the Phoenix Suns, sat out. I wonder if there's maybe like a trade in the works or something's going on, but John Collins just went absolutely bonkers in that game. I think that it would probably be a decent spot for him as well, given the fact that like Lively's pretty flexible defensively, but Gafford, you're not seeing switch as much. You're seeing him a little bit more in a drop. And I think that Collins' ability to stretch the floor will actually probably be pretty helpful against both Lively, but Gafford a little bit more in particular. So just one of the things that I'm looking for in that Thursday game. This is going to be a good slate. I'm pretty excited for it. And I hope that you guys can tune in to the NBA bet stream. For my recommendation for the week, I'm going to recommend split turkey breast. So instead of like a rotisserie chicken, I got the turkey breast at the food store, and it was pretty good. The reason I'm saying it like this is that it's really good for sandwiches, actually. So like instead of getting like the deli meat, I think that it was better you could get like the turkey breast and just slice it and use it for a sandwich instead of like deli meat. With all like the listeria and stuff, I just haven't bought deli meat in a while besides like prosciutto because I don't. But besides that, I think that it's kind of a good opportunity. You're getting like real meat on it. And like I'm kind of warming up to turkey right now. I'm trying to get into like the Thanksgiving mood. We've got that coming up. So, like being able to get the split turkey breast, I'm like, oh yeah, like turkey's pretty good. I like that, and like trying to go from there. So I'm gonna recommend getting like instead of getting the rotisserie chicken every time, maybe switch it up and get like a split turkey breast. It's not too bad. It's good for sandwiches, a good like just as a meal. You could throw a little gravy on it, whatever you wanted to do. But it does kind of switch it up, and it's a high protein food. Obviously, low fat, high protein. It's great for it's great for putting on some lean mass for the guys. It's bulking season again, so we're back. We're bulking, and we're trying to build up that bankroll. And one of the best things that we can do to build that bankroll is use our tools at Rhythm. And you can get that for a free week with the link in this bio, and build your own models. Use it for cross-referencing your player props, use it for cross-referencing your spreads, your totals, etc., and incorporate it into your everyday betting lives to make you better, to make you smarter, and to keep some of the things that you just can't even process in your mind at the forefront, and it keeps you in check. It gives you some parameters, gives you some baselines, and you can get that again for a week free in the link in the bio here. So be sure to rate, subscribe, review, leave us a good rating, leave us a comment, what have you, and let's continue to cash that.